He walked into the saloon in blood-soaked clothes. Everyone fell silent. The pianist stopped playing, the card players put down their cards, even the cowboys at the bar froze in place. The only sound filling the silence was blood dripping onto the floor. This man was William Garrett, and what he did that evening would forever change the history of Deadwood. William Garrett's name was unknown to the residents of Deadwood on that cold October evening in 1876. The High Stakes Saloon door creaked as he entered, and all eyes fixed on him. No one knew that this man grew up 20 miles south on a small farm, where hard work and honor meant everything. Garrett's clothing told his story. The bloody shirt, dust-covered pants, the hat sitting askew on his head, but most shocking was that his gun was missing from his belt. An armed man without a weapon in the Wild West was equal to death. The saloon owner, Jake Morrison, cautiously approached him. Morrison had run the high stakes for 20 years and had heard every story there was. But he had never seen anything like this. Garrett slowly surveyed the room. His eyes stopped at a table where 3 men sat. Each was well known in town. Tom Bradley, the landowner, Samuel Hayes, the bank manager, and Charlie Dunn, the deputy sheriff. What followed shattered Deadwood's peace. Garrett's voice was deep and tired when he spoke. He told how 3 weeks earlier he had returned to his farm to find his wife and 2 children dead. The farm was robbed, the animals driven away, the house burned down. The local sheriff, who was Bradley's friend, said Indians had attacked. But Garrett knew the truth. The tracks didn't lie. Horseshoe nails in the ground that didn't come from Indian horses, cigarette butts that only white men smoked, and a small gold button that Charlotte, his wife, had torn from her attacker's coat before she died. This button was now in Garrett's pocket. It came from Bradley's coat. The atmosphere in the saloon grew tenser. Bradley stood up, put his hand on his weapon, but Garrett stopped him with a gesture. He didn't come to shoot. He came to tell the truth. Hayes tried to calm the situation. He suggested they go to the sheriff's office to settle it there. But Garrett shook his head. The sheriff was in on it too. All 3 of them. Bradley was a wealthy man who wanted to acquire thousands of acres of land in the valley. Garrett's farm stood right in the middle of the area he wanted to sell to an Eastern investment company. But Garrett didn't want to sell, so Bradley looked for another solution. Garrett's voice broke when he started talking about his family. Charlotte was 28, a beautiful, kind woman who loved gardening. His children, Emma and Joshua, were 8 and 10 years old. Emma always sang while working. Joshua was constantly asking questions about everything. That evening, when Garrett returned home, Emma was still lying in the kitchen where she tried to protect her mother. Joshua in the stable where he tried to hide. Charlotte in the bedroom where she last saw them. No one in the saloon dared to move. Both men and women were crying. Even the toughest cowboys broke down at Garrett's words. Bradley finally spoke. He denied all accusations. He said Garrett had gone mad with grief and was accusing innocent people. But Garrett took out the button. Recognition showed on Bradley's face. That's when Hayes stepped in. He revealed that he had financed Bradley's plan. The Eastern investors promised huge sums for the valley's lands, but they needed the entire area, not just part of it. Without Garrett's farm, the whole deal was void. Dunn, the deputy sheriff, tried to silence Hayes, but it was too late. The truth was out. Hayes continued his testimony. He said that Bradley hired 3 bandits who pretended to be Indians. But something went wrong. The gang didn't just want to drive the family away, they killed them. Bradley became enraged. He drew his gun, but Garrett was faster. With one motion, he twisted the pistol from Bradley's hand and knocked him to the ground. In the midst of chaos in the saloon, Garrett faced a decision. He could have killed Bradley, Hayes, and Dunn. No one would have stopped him. The crowd had turned against Bradley. But Garrett chose differently. He took Bradley's pistol and handed it to Jake Morrison, the saloon owner. He said he wanted justice, not revenge. The law would decide their fate. But the story didn't end there. Garrett still held one secret. The bloody clothes he appeared in weren't just soaked with his family's blood. His own blood was on them, too. While Garrett spoke in the saloon, no one noticed he was slowly growing paler. The blood on his clothes wasn't just from his family. When he found them and followed the tracks, he encountered the hired killers. The fight was fierce. Garrett defeated all three, but not without injury. A knife had pierced deep between his ribs. He knew he didn't have much time left, but first he had to tell the truth. Morrison noticed Garrett's shoulder was getting increasingly wet. He wanted to call a doctor, but Garrett shook his head. He only asked that the three men be taken away and the federal marshal be sent for. Justice had to prevail. Garrett's last words moved the entire saloon. He asked Morrison to have a letter written. He had no family to bury him, but he wanted to be buried next to Charlotte, Emma, and Joshua in the small cemetery on top of the hill. The letter was to be addressed to a woman who lived in the neighboring state, Charlotte's sister. He wrote that he loved the family. He tried to protect them, and that justice finally prevailed. Bradley, Hayes, and Dunn were still standing in the corner of the saloon, awaiting their fate. The crowd was angry, but at Garrett's request, no one harmed them. The law would deal with them. As Garrett grew weaker, he revealed one final secret. The three hitmen he had defeated were still alive when he found them. Each of them confessed that Bradley had hired them, and each wrote a letter describing what happened. Garrett handed these letters to Morrison. This was the final proof. The fate of Bradley, Hayes, and Dunn was sealed. But there was one last surprise. Garrett said he knew what awaited him. He knew the wound was fatal. But he didn't come to the saloon because of death. He came for revenge. The real revenge wasn't killing Bradley and his associates. The real revenge was exposing them publicly, in front of everyone, so the whole town would know what they did, so they could never walk the streets of Deadwood with clean faces again. Bradley's wealth and influence vanished in an instant. Hayes Bank lost all trust, and Dunn could never become sheriff. Their entire plan collapsed. Garrett's revenge was perfect. He didn't need to shed blood. Truth was his weapon. Morrison made sure Garrett was comfortable in his final hours. A bed was brought to the back room of the saloon, and the whole town lined up to visit him. Everyone respected this man who sacrificed everything for the truth. Dr. Miller, the town's doctor, tried to save him, but it was too late. Garrett lay peacefully and talked with everyone who visited. He told stories about his family, his ranch, his dreams. Reverend Thompson, the local minister, stayed by his bedside in the final hours. Garrett told him he regretted nothing. He did what he had to do. His family would be proud of him. Deadwood was never the same after Garrett's death. People looked at each other differently. Corruption, which was natural before, suddenly became unacceptable. The city was cleansed. Bradley, Hayes, and Dunn went to trial. Based on the letters and witness testimonies, all three were convicted. Bradley got life. Hayes got 10 years. Dunn got 5 years. But their real punishment was being permanently ostracized. The federal marshal who arrived after Garrett's death said he had rarely seen such clean justice. The city solved the problem itself without bloodshed. Garrett's funeral was the biggest event in the city's history. Hundreds of people gathered in the small cemetery on top of the hill. The coffin was carried by the most respected men in the city. The minister gave a beautiful speech about the power of heroism and justice. He was buried next to Charlotte, Emma, and Joshua's graves. A simple inscription was carved on his tombstone, William Garrett, loving husband and father, soldier of justice. Over the years, the grave became a place of pilgrimage. People came from across the state to pay respects to the man who sacrificed everything for justice. Morrison renamed the High Stakes Saloon to Garrett's last stand. The room where Garrett died became a museum. The letters written by the hitmen were hung on the walls. The button that Charlotte tore off, and the pictures of the family. The city changed. The new sheriff who replaced Dunn was an honest man. The bank's new management operated transparently. Land deals became fair. Garrett's death not only saved a family from oblivion, but an entire city from corruption. But there's still one secret that nobody ever found out. Years later, Morrison found a letter in the saloon's attic. Garrett wrote it the night before his death. The recipient was unknown. In the letter, Garrett wrote that he knew who the fourth person was, someone who still lived in the city, someone who was still in position, or someone who helped Bradley plan it all. Morrison read the letter and decided to burn it. Garrett deserved peace. But before throwing it into the fire, a name caught his attention. A name that was shocking. Morrison never told anyone what he read in that letter. But from that day on, he looked at people differently in Deadwood. He knew that Garrett's revenge wasn't over yet, and perhaps it never would be.